a western guy can't be still, and a silent night is not for me. Roll back the rug so we can two-step round the Christmas tree. Roll back the rug so we can two-step round the Christmas tree. Oh, yeah.
Hey everybody, this is Eleanor, the youngest MacArthur child, and I've had this idea about doing a video about the Snowflake United Church now for a number of months, and it's now all just coming together to the point where I can pretty much publish and share this with everybody. I think this is a very good time of year to reflect about the United Church because we used to always go there every Christmas Eve for the Christmas Eve service. And I don't know about you, but I do think about that when Christmas rolls around. I would do anything to be able to go to that very Christmas Eve service now, just the way it was. But I'm hoping that this little trip down memory lane will help us to remember and think about things that we maybe haven't thought about in a while. Now, everyone in my immediate family participated in this video. So I'm viewing this as our personal story because we do have a personal connection to the United Church. And I think it's a story worth telling, and I think it's a story worth sharing. So my immediate family, I'm talking about my dad and my Aunt Mary, my siblings, Rob, Lynn, and Karen, all participated in their own way. Even you helped me, Rocky, right? All those times you kept me company while I was editing. Aw, sweetie. Will you say hi? And to the members of my immediate family who aren't with us, there is an absolute presence, like there is with any story about the farm, with our grandparents, Grandma and Grandpa MacArthur, our mother, and our Aunt Myrna. There are just a couple things I want to go over before we begin so that things make a little bit more sense to you, the viewer. I have been recording Zoom calls for the last couple of years as an excellent way to record a conversation and to get some farm history and to get some stories told. How are you?
I'm good. Now look at me. You see, I'm wearing my shirt.
Oh, you're wearing the snowflake shirt.
I'm wearing my snowflake shirt, and I'm putting on my snowflake hat. And I've got my bag.
Oh my gosh, Auntie. You got it all ready. It's so funny. Stories told. I found out there's a lot of stories I have not heard. So I've been really enjoying this. I love doing it on the Zoom format because it's very personal. It's casual. And when one person says something, it makes the other person chime in. And I probably get more out of it than if I asked everybody to go in their own corner and write it down. So I have found that to be a wonderful way to do some storytelling. And I want to give a big shout out to Greg Curry because Greg and I have worked on 3 projects together. First, he went out and did my personal farm tour on his drone. Second, I hired him a second time to go out and get a closer look at things because it was helping me illustrate some of the stories that were being told. And then last January, when the hoarfrost was so beautiful, I got Greg to go out a third time. As it was the perfect time to admire Grandpa's trees. And I'm talking about his shelter belt that he spent most of his life. When they bought the farm, there wasn't much there. And he worked all the way up to what it was when they sold the farm. And he had a lot of help doing that.
There's the trees. I remember those trees being 2 feet tall. Grandpa and I out hoeing all up and down in these trees. What a fun way to spend the summer. But Grandpa and his hoe, always rooting around.
And Grandma would never know the importance of all of her documenting and what we're doing with that now.
Well, that's interesting.
And Grandpa would also not know how much we're admiring his trees.
True.
I kind
Well,
of like both of those things. I really do.
We don't know what he knows. We hope he knows
Yeah.
something about it.
Well, I just don't think that either one of them would expect that, but might
No.
be a pleasant surprise. So,
Right.
I've said it before, it was some of the best money I've ever spent. And you can see how much I use that footage in this project. I don't want to give everything away in the introduction because there are a few surprises that are coming up. And lastly, because to honor the Christmas Eve service and how they used to do it was with the processional, so the senior choir would come in from the back of the church in their burgundy gowns singing. We all remember the song, Let There Be Peace on Earth. Beautiful song. They would come in from the back and go down the aisle and proceed up to the choir loft. And then we would proceed to have a very beautiful Christmas Eve service, and it would end the same way. They would just reverse that. So they would start singing the song, come down to the back of the church. They'd stand at the back of the church and sing until the end of the song. And so we're going to do the same thing with this video. We're going to begin and end it with Let There Be Peace on Earth. And I hope you'll stick around to the very end because there is one bonus track at the very end. If you're wondering why I'm starting the conversation with our shop fire, you'll be thinking, what the heck is she doing starting off with that? That has nothing to do with the United Church. Just go with it and trust that it'll all make sense. I started from the past and worked our way up to the present. My hope is that this video is something that you'll find time to watch over the holidays. I hope you enjoy going back in time with me. I've really enjoyed making it. And I hope you'll share it with anyone that you think will enjoy this little story. So Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope that this message finds you happy and well, and all the best into the new year, brand new year of 2024.
Happy holidays, everyone. Here is a timely song for you to enjoy. A song I heard a long time ago at a Christmas Eve service. It's called Let There Be Peace on Earth, and I'm thrilled Dad will be playing along with me. Thanks, Al, for your help.
The original shop burnt down on this site. I forget what year it was, but I know I was pretty young. Probably around 1976 or so. This one burnt down. And that fire created quite a bit of turmoil and almost started this barn on fire. These two are becoming a bit of a pain. Dan, put a muffler on that thing, would you? Yeah, gone. Had to hose down the roof to keep the shingles from starting up. There was a haystack that did burn to the ground, right about where that sprayer is. A big haystack. And it was quite a fire. And to make a long story short, we have this shed.
What did you find?
In Grandma's diary. Do you want to know the date?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm
Well, you're talking about when the shop burnt, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so here's what it says. So March 17th, 1977, this is her diary entry. Nice day, 32 degrees at bedtime. The shop and contents and bale stack burned this morning. Both fire trucks came quickly. Went to UCW at Ellen Gertson's, 11 present and 1 visitor. To get the UCW meeting in there. Next day, men worked all day picking up from the fire. I'll bet you were. Bill Smith, Pete Newstetter, and Earl Booker helped. Bob played at Killarney, still playing for dances, and your shop just burned. Next day, Bob and Elgin worked all afternoon picking up in the shop. Everett and Eileen Smith came to spend the evening. Bob played at Treehorn. And so on. Lots of picking up and getting, and she mentions about getting the chicken coop cleaned up. So obviously looking for the new spot for the shop.
yeah, I guess that would be it.
Yeah. There. So the rest of the story is yours. I was home and I witnessed some scary stuff and fire trucks and lots of stress. And I was pretty little, but yeah, go ahead and maybe talk about what that day was like.
Well, the way it started out was I went out to the barn to do chores in the morning, and first thing I always did was walked around to see how the cows were, if there was any new calves or anything. And I found this one cow had her calf way down on the far side of a snowbank in the west trees. And if I'd left the calf there, of course, it would have frozen to death. So I had to got it on some kind of a, I don't know if it was a sled or what it was, and dragged it up to the shop, put it inside there. And of course, without a little bit of heat, well, it's not going to do any good. So I set up the heat lamps that were used for chickens, hung that up and got it going. And then I built a fire in the stove, got it going. And once everything seemed to be under control, the calf was obviously not moving. It just needed to soak up some heat. So I thought, well, while this is happening, I'll quick go to the barn and milk the cows. And I got about halfway through milking the first cow when your mother came running to the barn door and hollered that the shop was on fire. And by the time we got over there, it was way too hot to even open it. Like, tried to open the door and the flames would have blown us over. So slammed it shut. So there was, there wasn't anything that could be done about the shop itself. It just had to be allowed to burn. But it had cedar shingles, and as they burned, they took off just like feathers into the air, and they drifted across and landed on the hay, the straw stack, and burnt it. And they drifted over and were landing on the roof of the barn. And if the fire trucks hadn't kept spraying water on the barn, it would have burned too.
Yeah. And it was a hot fire. I remember it burnt. There was coffee cans full of nails and bolts and everything else, and they were just melted. They were just like curling rocks. There was no, it was hot. It was a very hot fire.
No, it melted them together, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You probably remember the few pictures that were taken by someone, but there was a lot of black smoke, and what you're describing is probably why that, but talk about a lot of flammable things in one spot.
Yeah, between the oil and the tires probably were responsible for the black part of it more than anything else.
Yeah.
And so the thinking is that that little calf stumbled around and started the fire.
I believe so, but I suspected that probably the calf stumbled to its feet and, broke a bulb or something. But
Well, that poor little calf didn't have a very good chance in life, did it?
no, it didn't have a very good start, that's for sure. And that burned for days and days. We had neighbors stayed all night, the first night while I was away playing for the Downs. They took turns watching to make sure that the fire didn't start up again and cause trouble. And, I hated to, it almost seemed irresponsible in a way to take off and play for a dance while someone else was doing that. But on the other hand, well, they were willing to do that, and I had my commitments, and there's lots of things that the person did because of music that are probably questionable. Like when you took off at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the middle of a beautiful harvest afternoon to drive 100 miles to play for a dance. It didn't make a lot of sense from a business standpoint. Anyway, that's the way it was.
Well, it was good. It was good that you had neighbors and people in the community
yes.
that would step up and help too.
Right.
That's
And there were, lots of neighbors were really good that way. They wanted to help.
So do we want to switch gears and talk about the barn?
We can, yeah.
Well, thank God it didn't burn, or we'd be talking about a different story about the barn, wouldn't we?
We would, yeah.
So I looked up, remember the Chronicles of Our Heritage, that book, and then Grandpa did a write-up, and then you did a write-up, and I looked it up, and I took just a line out of there, and Grandpa wrote, in 1942, we purchased the old Presbyterian church, moved it home in sections, and made it into a good barn.
Yep, that's right. I was looking at that today.
Were you?
Some of the details. And the Presbyterian church was the first one that was built in town, and it was built in 1900. And then the one that became the United Church that you remember was the Methodist Church. And they existed separately up until 1925, when the United Church was formed from both of those churches and another one called the Congregationalists. Like the whole United Church of Canada was formed from those three churches.
Mm.
And anyway, so I'm thinking that probably from 1925 until 1942, that church building probably sat mostly unused. And it was likely just because it belonged to a central church and they hadn't got around to decommissioning it and selling it, that it still sat like that. But anyway, the interesting thing is that they took the roof off it, and they took the corners apart and laid each wall down separately, and they put it onto what they used to call truck wagons. They were the steel-wheeled wagons that were under hay racks, and they would have two of those with long timbers between them, and they'd set each wall onto one of those combinations and hauled it all the way from town out to the farm, and then stood it up again on the foundation. They probably had them all hauled out there before they started to put it together. And then they stood them all up and fastened them together again, and then built a new roof on it. And very, very time consuming, but that's the way people did then to save money. 1942, that was, right in the middle of wartime. So it wouldn't have been easy to get materials and that sort of thing.
This is the barn. And although that may not seem very exciting to many of you, this barn used to be a church. Presbyterian church, if I'm correct. From what was at the time a metropolis, Snowflake. Grandpa and company pulled it down wall by wall, brought it home, put a different roof on it, I understand, but the walls are all original. Church converted to barn. And we'll go in the barn now. Move that pole. Slide the door open, see if there's enough light for this In we come. Yes, this is the barn. Smell of musty hay. The sound of kittens rings a bell. Used to tether cattle up and down in these stalls. There's the gutter. I don't have very many fond memories of cleaning those out, although I did for many years. As did my father, as did his father. And the bull stops here. The bull's box. Or cows with calves who just haven't got used to the idea of having human beings around and being comfortable with them. And walk into the chop bin. And let's see. Any mice today? Nah. I can hear them, but I can't see them. The old grinder. A bit of light happening there. And we'll come out. Little well. Lots of parts, lots of goodies, turned into more of a storage facility than anything else. Come through here, and we used to drop hay down from the manger, or from the loft, into the manger and feed the cattle over the boards. This is how we did it. And I think, at this point, we'll take off up into the loft. And we got a low light shining here now. But this is the loft. Designed granaries for the grain to go into. It would feed down below into that rolling mill that I showed you. There's the door we just came through. So push hay down to the door. We bring it up in through this door or that one. In the olden days, there's a grapple. We used to run on that rail right up there. We go outside, drop into a hay wagon below, come back up inside, and drop on the floor. Those days are, of course, long gone now. There's the old swing. Sisters might remember that one. And there's a shot down the lane. So if you're driving up the lane, imagine somebody looking out at you. This would be their perspective.
It's a beautiful barn.
No, I watched the little video that
Yeah.
Curry took from inside there.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you noticed or not, but some things have been dismantled in there. You might or not remember, Eleanor, but I had built storage bins up in there for grain to be used for cattle feed.
Mm.
And there was actually 3,000 bushels of storage up in there. And most of that has been dismantled, except for the original 2 little bins that your grandpa built to put grain down to the old crusher. But
So he was right about guessing that it was milled.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Oh, camera movement there, Ellie. Sorry. This was a pretty elaborate setup back in the day. It looks like grain storage bins going to hoppers in the bottom part of the barn, where either a mix mill or some sort of crusher would have been used, I'm guessing. barn surprisingly in good shape for the roof being open.
When I started to feed cattle, I didn't have any proper grain processing facility for grinding grain and that sort of thing. And we were at the same time, we were short of storage for crops. So, you can build extra bins, but it was actually your grandpa's idea that there was all this space up in the loft of the barn that wasn't being used. And if we reinforced it, we could build bins up in there, and then the grain could be stored there and it would be right ready to run down and be ground for the cattle.
You guys spent a lot of time in the barn.
Well, yeah.
You guys greeted the day by opening the barn and pushing the light up. So tell me what that was like.
It'll wake you up when you open that door. You have all the fragrances of nature that whack you right in the face.
You never knew what you were going to find. There could be a calf half born, or maybe laying in the dirt in the bottom, and yeah, any number of things could happen.
So what would be the first thing you'd have to do for your chores?
When you first open up the barn door, and it wasn't a barn door that swung open, it was on a rail track system. So you would open the barn door, you would hit the stick which went across down to the light switch, and then you would get onto the 44 tractor, which had been sitting in the barn nice and warm, especially in the winter, and you would back that out and leave it running, but back it out of the barn and leave it running, and then go back inside. Now, by this time, all the cows are awake. They've all stood up, and of course, the first thing that they do, they don't wait to go outside. The first thing they do is they drop about 10 pounds right there for you, the first gift in the morning, and then you have to push the cows to the side, go up between them, untether them, which was a T-lock neck system, and then they would back out and just as a force of habit, they would head outside as they should. And then you would bring the tractor in and you would start loading up all the gifts that had been left for you overnight. And that was how most mornings started. There were some deviations from that based on whether it was calving season or breeding season, because the barn was where a lot of the breeding took place as well, especially the artificial insemination. And so there was all kinds of basic birds and bees learning experiences that were going on in the barn at any given time.
Okay, so cattle is like a huge tie you down. You got to do chores morning and night, right?
Right.
It's not quite like a dairy farm, but a little, because you're still there and you have to do that. So all the stories, Dad, about coming home from playing for a dance, but you're not done. I went off to bed bitching about getting up in the morning for church, and you're just putting your overalls on, and I don't know anything about that.
You talk about Dad coming home from playing in the band, and he would get home, it'd be calving time, and out the door, you got to go and check and see, because if you got a calf born in the mud, you got to get it out of there. And you talk about the barn being a part of the whole process with the feedlot. And it very much was. It was the safe house, if you will, for the cattle. The cows that were having trouble giving birth, we'd often have to pull the calves. The cows that already had a calf, we need to get them inside where they could mother up. And so, the barn was a big part of the whole feedlot operation, and the feedlot was a part of everything that was going on in the barn. So it was reciprocal. I remember, for example, Christmas. We would go out, and first thing in the morning, we'd get up and see what Santa got us, and then out to the barn and do the chores and get everything done, and come back in and have breakfast and open up some more presents, get in the car, drive to Winnipeg, another big meal, more gifts, and then get back in the car and drive all the way. And it didn't matter about the weather. You had to get back because there was cattle that needed to be tended to. And if there was an absolute emergency, maybe we would have been able to get a hold of Buff or somebody to come over and give a hand. But for the most part, it was a twice daily thing at the very least, especially in the winter, to take care of them. And so for me, it developed a sense of work ethic and a work ethic in adverse conditions, because it wasn't always, there's nothing glamorous. There's nothing glamorous about it. You know, it's not a,
You couldn't open the door and say it's snowing, I'm not going to go out today.
yeah, well, really, really.
Oh, that
And
brings,
then there was a lot of those times on the weekend too, where I had to get the chores done in time to get to church because I had commitments there too. Sang in the choir and I was a superintendent of Sunday school. Yeah.
And the barn got a bit of a break in the summer. We didn't have quite as many things going on. One year when we had a number of cows got into the sweet corn and had gone down bloated, and of course that's a whole nother story when you talk about dealing with cattle and bloating and how you can save their lives and sometimes you can't. I remember there was a bunch of them went down, but if I remember right, we processed 6 of them in the barn that day.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
literally phoned up the relatives. Everybody there was a booker that had a kid was over there, and it was just a very rapid process of taking care of those animals and trying to salvage that meat. So
I already know I wouldn't have been able to at all handle that. What you're just saying, I would have wanted to save every animal. I wouldn't have liked anything that you just described you were doing.
We wanted to save them all too, but we couldn't, so we had to accept that.
I cried
And then,
over
yeah.
every cat,
The other-
every dog, every animal, every squirrel, every whatever. So I would have been no good out there. Fun fact, when Greg Curry was in the barn, he said that it was unbelievable how brand new the cement floor looked.
Yeah, well, you know, it was probably, you know, done properly.
It has crisscrosses in it. Crisscrosses, remember?
Yeah, they did that with the fork tines. And that was so that the cattle wouldn't slip so easily on them.
Ah.
And what makes the concrete in a barn so good is that it is kept moist so much of the time. And when concrete is curing, that's a big part of the strength that comes from it, is keeping it moist for a long time.
Well, I was thinking there was a lot of cow manure drug across that cement.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
but yeah, no, it was the barn was very much the center of everything that was going on at the farm when the cattle operation was up and running.
Yeah, yeah, it was long days in there for sure.
It must have been pretty hard to get out of a warm bed knowing that you'd have to go out in winter.
Well, it's not hard if you never get in it.
So did you think when you were out there having a rough time, or you're into a birthing cow up to your shoulder with the glove, did you ever feel guilty for swearing out there because you were in a church?
I never really put that in place, no. No, there was a few words got away there that probably shouldn't have. Yeah.
So, Auntie, I wanted to tell you that I've talked at length with Dad and my brother Rob about the barn and their experience. So I'm asking you to go back in time a little bit here, if you don't mind. So when you recorded that little snippet for Dad's birthday, and you said, "You were my playmate. As soon as your legs would carry you, you were my playmate." And then you said, "We played in the barn. We jumped in the hay. We played with the kittens." And
So sure enough, it was a week later when Mom came home and brought you with her, a very good baby boy, and soon to be my playmate. As soon as your legs would carry you, you were my playmate. We played with the kittens. We played in the loft. We jumped in the hay. I pushed you on the swing.
And it occurs to me that barn has seen so much, those walls of the barn, if they could talk, to see the two of you as little children playing in the barn. That's something I'll never witness in my whole life. I'd love to, but I don't think there was a camera rolling. I wanted to find out what your earliest memories are, or whatever memories that you have of that barn.
Okay, well, can I start before the barn?
Certainly.
Maybe Bob can add to this. Bob, do you remember the old barn before this barn was built?
Just slightly. I
Okay.
remember it. I remember it standing there kind of waving in the wind, and I wasn't supposed to go close to it in case it fell down.
Yeah. I'm not even sure what the roof was, but like there was one end of it had a loft, but you know, it wasn't the kind of loft that we were used to in the big barn. Like it was, and I don't think it wasn't a very nice place. And my memory of that wasn't great was that when mom and dad milked the cows in the summertime, there would be flies, and so my job was to hold the tails of 2 cows and
Wow.
hope that nothing happened. You know, like I'm supposed to hold, you know, here's my hands. I'm holding these tails and to keep them from switching right in grandpa and mom and dad's face. So anyway, it was a big deal when we got that new barn because it had a cement floor. We didn't have rats then, as far as I know, unless Bob can correct me on that. But like in those old barns that didn't have proper foundations, rats were always a problem, right?
Right.
So I don't know if it did mention that, you know, what they used for building material for the barn besides cement, you know, like they bought that church in Snowflake, the Presbyterian church, and tore it down in parts. And
They actually moved it as much without tearing it apart.
Yeah, that's right.
took the roof off, and then they laid the sidewalls down and rolled them on old truck
Okay.
wagons, they called them,
Yeah,
and then stood them up again. But they had to build a new roof. Yeah.
yeah. But you know, like the thing is, they never thought about hiring a contractor.
No.
You know, they didn't do that. The community guys came together, like they knew how to do stuff.
Mhm.
Ed Finley and Dad and Uncle Ken, they knew how to do things. Cement was probably done there, wheelbarrows full, Bob, do you think?
Oh, yes, it was there would be they called it a cementing bee, which
Yeah.
was before they knew that it was actually called concrete. But anyway, yeah, there'd be a mixer, which would be driven by a gasoline engine, just a small
Right.
mixer. They would somehow they would get gravel trucked in, I guess, and dumped. And so there'd be gravel and sand and then bags of cement.
Right.
And the water, of course, didn't come from a garden hose. It had to be hauled as well
I know.
from the well, put in by pailful.
Yeah.
And usually the size of the mixers they used, usually they'd mix about 1 wheelbarrow full at a time. So there was usually quite a few people involved, quite a few wheelbarrows and lots of men around. And I remember being around for a number of those bees when they at Uncle Ken's, when they put the basement under the house, and when they put the basement in the hen house. The building was there first, but then they put the concrete floor in afterwards. And I remember, you know, water fights and all that sort of thing. You know, like Landon Booker and Wilbur Booker were all just kind of just at the end of their teen years, sort of, and lots of.
So that would have been after the war, was it?
After the war, yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. That would be 46 or 47, probably.
40, yeah, in around there, 48.
Like, Bob, you seem to have a memory of some of those things that I just sort of don't.
Well, you probably.
Maybe I wasn't as interested. I'd be interested from a distance, but I'm sure they didn't involve. Mostly, I was probably supposed to be.
There would be times when you were in school and I wasn't in school yet when I was.
Well, that's true.
Around those things. Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And so but you know, getting back to, you know, playing in the barn. Well, in the spring of the year, there was always cats having kittens and hiding them into the corners of the hay. So we would be up there looking for kittens. Whenever cousins would come to visit in the summer, that was one of the things to do, was to go up in the hay loft and jump off the platform, climb the ladder, jump off the platform into the deep hay.
Well, I was hoping you got a chance to play in there, Dad, for 5 minutes of your life, because you certainly worked a lot in the barn for many years.
That video that Greg took of the barn,
yeah,
somewhat recently,
yeah,
it let a person see things that weren't seeable for quite a while.
mm-hmm.
After I built all those bins up in the barn, you couldn't see the platform up there that was used to service the rope and pulley system. But after they tore those bins down, then you could see it again in his video.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a ladder up the west wall, and then there was a platform up near the roof. And when you needed to repair the car that pulled the hay in, you pulled it back there and worked on it from that level. It was before I bought the elevator. I was short of storage.
Yeah.
And so it was actually Grandpa's idea to put bins up there, because they already there was a floor there and there was a roof, and all we had to do was put up
Yeah.
the walls, and
Mhm.
it gave us extra storage.
Mhm.
See, that stuff I don't know anything about because, you know, like I left the country and
Right.
here you go.
Well, and I don't either, so I'm learning a lot. And I wasn't a good student and I wasn't good or caring about history, but I quite enjoy this history. This is relatable to me. So,
Mm.
so I'm a better student now than I was before.
Worn and withered with its roof sunk in, stands an old barn in an empty field. Just a husk left now from its glory days. I bet it's been 40 years since the loft held hay. They all fall down, they all fall down. When I close my eyes, I can resurrect every broken board, every chip of pain. Touch the walls of a simpler time, when the barnyard was the center of life. They all fall down, they all fall down. There are memories there that strain to be heard as the rooster crows. The new world turns, crying out from the landscapes as we pass. Walls, rafters, and rusted nails, held strong through joy and hardship there. Though my heart grows heavy, I realize the barn had served its purpose in life. They all fall down, they all fall down, they all fall down, they all fall down. Worn and withered with its roof sunk in, stands an old barn in an empty field.
How's everybody?
I think I'm well. How's everybody else?
Good. I'm so happy that you're here and that you're willing to talk about the United Church. And
I have to correct something, Bob, that it isn't correct, but it's just an adding. You know, the year that the two churches actually got together, the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church, was 1924, a year before the actual church union of Canada.
I see.
They did
Okay.
a trial thing, and they had a vote. And I think I told this before, I'm sure I told it before, that the vote went in favor by one vote. And on the way back from church, Grandpa Fairburn, who had voted against joining, said, "I wonder who cast the extra vote." And Grandma Fairburn said, "Why, Al, I voted in favor of it." And so there you go. Grandma was feisty too. Not as if her vote was the only one, but anyway,
Right.
so they joined up for a year and then they stayed joined up. So
I see. So she didn't care if she was being different.
no, well, she just thought it had to happen. You know, she could
Right.
see that it was inevitable. So,
Mhm.
But do you want to know what church was like? Is that what you're saying? What church was like for us when we were kids, or what?
Well, what church did you go to when you were kids?
United
We
Church.
both went to the United Church as you would have known it.
So, yeah, Dad, do you want to start us off with some history there?
It was I guess, chosen as the better of the buildings between the two types of churches. So that's the one they kept, and the other one was sold.
Mm-hmm.
And until about I'm going to say roughly 1949 or 50, it didn't have a very good basement under it. It was just kind of a dugout basement. So at one point there, they completely finished the job and they poured concrete walls underneath it. And I can remember it was probably about the time I started school, because I can remember the activity going on over at the church. And I think I probably went over there after school once or twice rather than going home on the school bus. And that basement, of course, then once that was finished, it was much better for the social events they had, such as the fall supper and the bazaar and the tea and all the things that were regular activities there. Now, initially the furnace was a coal furnace, and for so long back as I can remember, Grandpa Booker was I guess you'd say, the caretaker or fireman, and he went over every Sunday morning or maybe Saturday if it was cold weather, and got the fire going and kept it going.
What did you say, Grandpa Booker?
Yeah, Grandpa Booker. Grandpa Booker, yeah.
Roy Booker did it that I can remember.
Well, before him,
Grandpa.
by the time Roy was doing it,
Okay.
it might have still been coal then for a while, but then they changed over to oil after a time as well. But there was a coal bin downstairs in the back end of the basement, and that, of course, had to be dumped through a coal chute outside and carried over and put into the furnace.
There was a little nook where you could go to the bath or toilet too if you had to. Trust me to get the toilet talk in.
Yeah, there was a little corner there with, I can't remember whether it had doors on it or whether it was just.
I don't know. I think a curtain.
Likely a curtain. That was more common. Yeah.
Auntie, you are the bathroom arrangement police for sure.
Very important to each other. I still always immediately think of toilet issues. That must have been interesting trying to get that many bums looked after.
Well, you made
I
sure.
always think of that because to me it's very important to have a good place to go.
Yeah, you always made sure that the pail was empty Christmas morning.
Absolutely. Important.
You care very much about the facilities.
Well, I know for sure that it had been made before 1951 because that's when Myrna was married in 1951, and her shower was in the basement of the church.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I would have started school in 48, so it probably was in that area, 1948, 49, where they redid the basement. Somewhere closer to 1960, when they did a major renovation on the upstairs of the church, and they took out what used to be called wainscoting. It was vertical wood boards all the way around the church that were about 4 feet high. And they replaced that with, trying to think of the name of the material, but it was solid sheets of stained material. And then above that, they put in a form of, I'm trying to think of the name of the material. It wasn't plaster. It was a composition board that had some insulation value to it. And then they tore out all the old plaster and the plaster lath. And Uncle Ken took all those wainscoting boards, which were hard fir. He took them home and he built any number of things. He built picnic tables, he built chairs, garden ornaments. You wouldn't believe the number of stuff that he built from that. And it was the toughest material to work with because it was hard fur, and it split easily. And he would saw the paint off it and sand it, and of course he was doing that. When he was doing that, Grandpa was gnashing his teeth because he wanted Ken to be out in the field working, and here he was working on these boards.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
anyway,
for two brothers that were so close to each other, they had different passions, didn't they, for doing
they
things.
certainly
Dad
did.
was
Yes.
musical, and Uncle Ken was more the artist and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. hmm
Do you want to know what it was like to go to Sunday school when I was a girl?
Yes.
Okay. And maybe Bob, you can add to that. You were 5 years younger. So I
Right.
remember starting to Sunday school, and each class, when you went to Sunday school in the morning, each class sat in their own row with their teacher. Like they didn't sit with their parents. In fact, most parents didn't come to church. There were just a very few adults that came to Sunday school, I should say. And then when we had our little penny and collection tied in the corner of our handkerchief, and we went to our classes. First of all, Grandpa Booker was at the front. He was the superintendent. And we went through the little ritual, just like a mini church service. And then we went off to our classes, and then we came back together again afterwards. Bob, is that pretty well what it was like what you remember as a small child?
Yes, I think so. And they did have an adult class. I can't remember what they named it, but it would meet at the back of the church while the children were out in their individual class spaces. And sometimes it was led by the minister, sometimes by somebody else. But
Mrs. Clyde Maxwell, Mary was her name, I think. Mrs. Clyde Maxwell was Robertson. Mrs. Clyde Robertson. When I was a kid, I remember her being the leader of the Bible class.
Okay,
of the Bible
I see.
class,
Okay,
yeah.
Right. Yes, and it's possible Ethel Hedrick might have been for a time. I'm not sure. And in the good weather, so like there was a shortage of spaces to have all the different classes, because we would have probably at least 6 classes for the younger people.
Yeah.
There was, what did they call it? Cradle roll, and then primary, junior 1, junior 2, junior 3, intermediate 1, intermediate 2. And so they divide the basement up with wires and blankets hanging that they pulled across. And in good weather, we would go out and some of them would be in cars. We'd sit outside in the car for the class.
We were never, when I was little, we were into the annex, is where we got to the annex.
Right.
Side.
The annex in the basement, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then when you got to be maybe 12 years old or so, you got to be in the choir, and it was led by Mrs. Hedrick. And she also was our teacher, quite strict. And we were supposed to know some of the answers, and we didn't always know the answers. And singing was not my strength, but anyway, we had some pretty hard anthems we had to learn to sing. So anyway, that was Sunday school. And in the wintertime, because church was in the evening and Sunday school in the morning, in the winter, they put the two together, and we had church and Sunday school in the afternoon to save coal or oil, whichever.
Yes, and we have to remember at that time that Snowflake was not just a 1-point charge, it was a 4-point charge. So Snowflake was at the center, and there were 4 other points the minister had to cover. So what they would do is the outside 4 places would have alternating Sundays. So the minister would have 3 sermons to preach each Sunday. He'd go to, one place early, and then Snowflake in the middle, and then go to the other place later. And then the next Sunday, he'd do the other 2 outside points along with Snowflake.
So Purvis, Mackenzie, Mowbray,
and Windigates.
Yeah.
Windigates was a long drive.
Wow.
Auntie, you were married in the church.
Yes, on a very hot day in July, the end of July, yeah.
Yeah.
And so And our dinner, our supper was held downstairs. So the place was nice enough to have that. And I presume the ladies, probably the women's auxiliary, probably served with the supper. I don't know for sure. I had other things on my mind.
There used to be two ladies groups. There was Ladies Aid and no, I'm going to say United Church Women, but there was what was the name of the other group?
WMS, the Women's
WMS,
Missionary
that's right.
Society. Yeah.
Right.
And then, Auntie, I only recently learned about the very unique wedding anniversary present that you got for you and Gordon's 50th anniversary.
Yeah, a lovely pencil drawing of the church. Yeah. So it's
So what was the story behind that?
Somebody came up with the idea of wouldn't it be nice to have a picture of the church, and Rochelle and Corey happen to have a friend at Church Bridge that does lovely pencil drawings, so they found out where they could get a picture of the church, which was in one of those history books, and she made a sketch, and yeah, so that's nice.
Mm-hmm. I believe, Eleanor, one of your questions was about the smaller building.
Yeah, I believe that if I got the story right, it was Rochelle who was looking for a picture so that Corey's friend there could do the pencil drawing off of it. Mm-hmm. So did they not contact you, Dad, and you provided the picture from the book, The Echoes of the Past, that shows that, but it also shows that smaller building that I wanted to ask you about. So do I have that right so far?
I believe so. Yes, I'm quite sure I was involved in getting the picture for them to work from.
Yeah.
And the smaller building, it probably had different names. Some people called it a manse. Some people called it, I don't think in the United Church they didn't call it a rectory.
Parsonage.
Parsonage was the other one, yes. And the reason for that is that the minister of some churches was called a parson. And so the place that he lived was called the parsonage. And the church owned the building and provided that as part of the agreement with the minister to for his sort of like part of his salary, a place for him to live.
Kind of like the teacherage.
Sort of, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I did never know there was something like that for the church.
Well, it got sold separate from the church. As I think when the minister no longer lived at Snowflake, when they lived in Laravere, then there was no need to have the parsonage, so to speak, there. So then it got sold off.
Anyway, the big thing for me about church was the music was so important. The choir, like they met during the week and had a choir practice. Bob, you probably later on, it was part of that, but I'm thinking, I'm so much older, 5 years older. I'm thinking that I did know they met, and they every Sunday they had an anthem.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they were always dressed up. Eileen Smith was just dressed up so beautiful. And
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So in October of 1997, Leanne Smith's wedding was the last thing that happened at the United Church before it was no more.
I see. Mm-hmm.
I was at that wedding, and that would have been the last time I was in the United Church. And I'm going to use a D word that I don't like. You probably know what I'm going to say. It was shortly after that the church was demolished, and I really do hate that word because I absolutely get visuals that come with that. But they did some things and salvaged some reusable parts in the church before that happened. And I think that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so let's pause here for just a moment because we're about to go from the past into the present. Wayne Motherall sent me a few pictures, and these two that I'm about to show you are pictures of the community getting ready for the auction sale, which was to happen in June of 1998. And he sent me a newspaper article that was in the Observer. I'm going to read the article and put it up so that you can follow along. Here goes. Closing Worship at Snowflake is the headline, by Elsie Brown and Landon Booker. For some in attendance at the closing worship service for Snowflake United Church on June 19, 1994, the occasion marked the closing of the building where they had worshipped all of their lives. It was a deeply emotional occasion for many who had witnessed the previous closure of other congregations within this multi-point charge. No one wanted to see it happen, but it was probably inevitable in view of the fact that the community had lost their other facilities such as railway, local businesses, and school. The church closure represented one more loss of regular social contact within the community, although the building will continue to be used for special events such as weddings and funerals during the next year. Among the sentiments shown this day were sadness, obviously, but also a deep sense of pride in what had happened here for so many years. This is especially apparent in the field of music. It was mentioned that the building was as much a concert hall as a church, and indeed this was very true. Hanging in the church is a picture of the first choir formed in 1906, and through the years that musical traditions was well maintained with Sunday school choirs, church choirs, orchestras, recitals, concerts, and so on. Fittingly, the final service included 3 anthems. Many former members were in attendance, as well as the recent ministers of the La Riviere Pastoral Charge and representatives from Agassiz Presbytery. Reverend Georgina Laux conducted the service. Landon Booker gave a short resume of the church history, while Glenn Wheeler reported on the disposal of funds. Reverend Marie Goodyear, Agassiz Presbytery Chair, gave a brief comment on behalf of Presbytery. Prayers of thanksgiving and intercession were led by Elsie Brown. Former members of the church joined with the regular members to sing Song of Fellowship, Till the Storm Passes By, If You Believe, and the dismissal Go Now in Peace. Pianist was Jean Motherall and organist Joan Wheeler. Everyone then enjoyed a time of visiting and refreshments served in the curling rink. There was a table on which were displayed many pictures and memorabilia connected with the church history. Orders were taken for commemorative plates. And there's a picture of the Methodist Church to become the Snowflake United Church. The time has come for Snowflake congregation to be going in new directions as each family chooses a new church from among the several neighboring charges. Distances may complicate some people's involvement in their new congregations, but if we become involved in another church family, our enthusiasm for the spreading of the gospel will keep up. It can be an end or it can be a beginning, an opportunity to join a new congregation and help it survive, and maybe even become better. Let us opt for a beginning. That is an emotionally charged little article. And I don't know if it's because it was just so well written, or the contents, or both, but that was not my first attempt to get through that reading. That must have been a very difficult service to attend for those of you who were there. But I want to say it's difficult in a different way when you're not there, because sometimes that might have offered a way of closure and an opportunity to say goodbye. So thank you, Mr. Motherall. I really appreciated getting that article. It's an important part to the story and the history. I loved my favorite part was the end when there was this optimism about the future. And I want to say that going forward in this video is my favorite part, because now we get to feel inspiration and hope, and it proves that there's life after death. And just ironically enough, Willie Nelson just turned 90. And I thought we would use some of his music to help us close the chapter of the past and open it to the future, which has now become the present. So let's do that now.
You were always on my mind. Maybe I didn't hold you all those lonely, lonely times. And I guess I never told you I'm so happy that you're mine. Little things I should have said and done, I just never took the time. But you were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. Tell me that your sweet love hasn't died. And give me one more chance to keep you satisfied. I'll keep you satisfied. Little things I should have said and done, I just never took the time. But you were always on my mind. 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 On the road again. Just can't wait to get on the road again. The life I love is making music with my friends, and I can't wait to get on the road again. On the road again. Going places that I've never been, seeing things that I may never see again. I can't wait to get on the road again. On the road again. Like a band of gypsies, we go down the highway. We're the best of friends, insisting that the world keep turning our way. And our way is on the road again. I just can't wait to get on the road again. The life I love is making music with my friends, and I can't wait to get on the road again. Just can't wait to get on the road again. The life I love is making music with my friends, and I can't wait to get on the road again. And I can't wait to get on the road again.
Karen, did you know that you were born to be a little field reporter?
Well, I was a field adjuster for a long time, so I wasn't, I did do investigation and photographs to a certain degree, yes.
Wow. Well, now that I know what you're capable of, you might be sorry that you showed me how good you are at this stuff.
Uh-oh.
So, Karen, you ended up getting to go on a field trip to Wawanesa, and I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But Auntie, I learned that you beat Karen to there because you and Gordon made a trip there. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, we were heading back to Manitoba from having been at probably St. Claude, I would imagine. We'd likely made a circuit. And I realized we were not that far from Wawanesa. And I said I wanted to go. And Uncle Gordon said, oh, I just wanted to get home. There wasn't much point going there. We'd seen everything. It was at Snowflake. And I said, no. But once I put my foot down, I said, we're going and that's it. So away we went, and there was somebody there, and they let us in, and we had a good look at the pews and the windows. I was so impressed with how they did the windows and everything. And yeah, it was just made me feel good. And I used that. I used Snowflake as an example of how a community can move on and doesn't have to die. Like the people from Snowflake are spread all over and are doing their part wherever they are. And then it was just like a metaphor for that happening, to think that the parts of the church could be used in other churches. So that's my little sermon for the day. Yeah.
And Karen, I'm going to run all the video that you took, but I want to ask you something. I want to ask you, what did it feel like to be there and see those beautiful windows and pews in person?
Well, it was a little bit weird. Like, I knew it was coming. I've been preparing this, I was kind of organizing this field trip for work, and so they arranged to have I asked if they could have the doors unlocked somehow, and they were more than happy to do that. So these two ladies were there kind of for us to be there for the day. But anyway, when I went in there, I had already kind of known that they were going to be there, and I know we saw some pictures that Aunt Mary had sent before, so I kind of knew that they were split up and everything. But it was definitely quite something to see them in person. It was kind of nostalgic, a little bit, got a little overwhelmed a little bit. And actually, when I looked at the pews, like, when you're a kid, you don't really see things for what they are, right? Like, it's just kind of, you take it for granted. So, so when I went in there, I was like, oh, right, look at the pews. Like, they look so nice. Like, that had such nice, like, carving in the side. And I kind of forgot about that. And then when I was videotaping, I saw a plaque, which I thought was going to say, like, memorial for somebody, maybe from Wawanesa. But it actually said, thanks to the Snowflake United Church, or this is a gift from whatever it said exactly. But I do know that a few people that I met that day, when I mentioned that I was the one that was from Snowflake, they said, oh, right, you wanted to see the church. And they said that we were so grateful to get those windows and pews because it was a gift. We didn't have to pay for it. It was just, we had to drive down and pick it up. But it was a gift. Otherwise, that's all we had to do. So they were very appreciative. So I got a little, little verklempt there, but it was really nice. Yeah.
And the thing about those pews is that they were nicer pews. They're curved to fit the building rather than being perfectly straight, which in a lot of places the pews are just straight. So
Right.
They actually, believe it or not, a little more comfortable than some. So.
And like anything, you wish you pay attention to things more when you were younger, because they're beautiful windows. And we have just a few pictures that Dad or somebody took, like 4 slides of the inside of the church when this was all in Snowflake. And there's a picture of the windows all together in one great big piece. And they are really beautiful. And you do take things for granted a little bit when you just think they're normal and you see them all the time. But it's nice when you can stop and smell the roses once in a while and appreciate really how beautiful they are.
And they really appreciated them there too in Wawanesa. So that was really nice to know that it wasn't taken for granted by them either. So that's kind of nice,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's a great story.
September 19th, 2023, I'm at Wawanesa, Manitoba, the Wawanesa United Church, where the Snowflake United Church stained glass windows and pews have been used when they built this church. What year was the church built?
Oh, Alma, help me. 1998.
Oh, okay.
When was the church built? 96. 96.
Okay. All right. So these are the pews and the stained glass. So now these plaques that are on the pews, are they from, like, did you guys put them on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sure I've got my glasses. A gift from,
Oh, it says Snowflake United Church.
there.
Oh.
I'm looking at it strangely because they've got snowflake as 2 words.
Right. Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, that's excellent.
And
Oh,
as I
that's,
was saying, when they were in Snowflake
Yes.
Church, they were high, but of course
they were.
this is lowered.
Of course, when I was young, I didn't really think of the windows. I just knew they were there. And that was on the top and those were on the bottom.
Right.
So I didn't realize they were separate. I thought they were all one piece. Of course, I was just a little kid, so.
Yeah. And so
Beautiful
they
church.
took those and put them all over there.
Right.
But they're beautiful.
Yeah, aren't they? The pews are beautiful. Okay.
I'm just going to interrupt here for a minute because since we recorded the Zoom call, as part of the pictures from Wayne Motherall, he included these two. So this is the group of people who attended the dedication service at Wawanesa for the stained glass and the pews. And I think you'll recognize a lot of these faces. Back row, left to right, starting with Glenn Wheeler, Jean Gardner, who's Joan's sister, Judy Booker, Jean Motherall, Vivian Weeks, Elaine Smith, Wayne Motherall, and Landon Booker. And in the front row, starting at the left, Hazel Taylor, that's our dear sweet Aunt Hazel, Eileen and Everett Smith, and Joan Wheeler. What a good feeling that must have been to see the new home for the stained glass and the pews at Wawanesa. So through this story is how I found out, through emails going back and forth, is that I didn't know that Uncle Ken and Grandpa had a hand in making that. Well, not just had a hand, made that cross.
Right.
So, Dad, do you know anything more about details about the construction of that? And I shouldn't be surprised because this is a community and people do make their own stuff, but I just didn't know about the personal connection about Grandpa and Uncle Ken making that cross.
Yes, they Uncle Ken had lots of woodworking equipment, and I don't remember exactly how much my dad contributed to that, but the two of them worked together on it anyway. And I suspect that Letha was probably involved in finishing the cross, whatever kind of finishing was put on it. And then when it came time to put it up in the church, well, then Grandpa and I did that. We made the brackets that fastened it onto the wall and mounted it up there. And it was made in such a way that it could be lifted off easily if you had to do some work on it or to paint behind it or whatever. And then after it had been up there for a while, decided that it didn't show up as well as it should. So we decided to put lights behind it. And we could have done that in a very expensive way, I suppose, but if you remember the way we had the lights in the basement of the house around the rec room there, decided to use those same indoor-outdoor Christmas lights with the amber bulbs. And we just put brackets on the back of the cross and fastened them up there, and they did the job. They shone on the wall, and you could see
What a great story. Isn't that a wonderful story?
And that made such a nice effect.
You're like, Uncle Ken with his skills with wood, and Aunt Letha always in the background doing things. And then your dad and uncle and grandpa knowing how to do the other stuff that wasn't, the more technical stuff.
Right.
I just think
And
that's
it was oak wood, which is extremely difficult to work with because you have to have very sharp cutters to. And it was if the shape of it wasn't just straight wood. The edges were chamfered or beveled in a certain way to give it the effect. And
Yeah.
and then down the middle and crossways, there's a brass strip that was put on afterwards on the surface. And it was on that strip, I believe, or at the bottom of the strip where there was the engraved plaque went on.
Yes, and to back up slightly, it was because Karen was already going to Wawanesa. And I found out that the cross and 2 pulpit chairs and the communion table were at Headingley. Now, I didn't even know Headingley was in Winnipeg. I thought Headingley was maybe the name of the town.
And did you know that that's where Uncle George and Aunt Myrna went to church after they went to Winnipeg?
No,
They
no, I
went to
didn't know that.
they supported Headingley Church.
Oh,
And
that's
they
sweet.
supported at the fall supper and everything.
So Karen, right? Then I was like, I wonder if Karen, my little field reporter, would be willing to go to Headingley. And then Karen, you very willingly did set that up on a day that you had off of work.
Yeah, so I think I had said, well, if you want me to go, and maybe that's when you thought it was really far, but Headingley is just like outside the perimeter, like it's attached to Winnipeg, but it's not like it is a town. But anyway, yeah. So I called the church to see and I left a message. So the minister called me back a couple weeks later, and we set up an appointment. So I went out there and met with her. So see, the church used to be St. Charles and Headingley together. And then I guess they demolished the St. Charles church. But anyway, so I went in, took some pictures, got lots of really good details. So when I went and I took some pictures of the cross, I was able to stand up on a chair to get kind of, because it was pretty high up, get a picture of the plaques that were on there. And I knew where there was a plaque, at least one plaque. There were 2. And then I think they may still have the original lights, actually, because they look like those big Christmas light bulbs that are still there. But there was the communion table and the cross for sure. And I don't think there were any pulpit chairs.
Well, Karen, you did take a picture of one pulpit chair. So I think the picture you took, remember at the church, there was the podium, and then the 2 big pulpit chairs, and then the communion table. And so they got the cross, the communion table, and the 2 chairs. And you'll see on here, I'll put the pictures. You'll maybe remember taking the picture of that chair.
Well, there was that plaque, like in the kind of the lobby area there, where they have, before you go into the church, there was the plaque on the wall that said, "Thanks to Snowflake United Church for the," again, they're, like I thought that was just so nice that they made a special thanks to Snowflake for donating that, so. Hello, today is Tuesday, October 10th, and I'm at the Headingley United Church. It amalgamated with the St. Charles United Church. So the cross was at that church, St. Charles, and then it got brought over here to Headingley. I think in 2019 is when the minister just told me. But so this is the outside of the church. This is the front of the church. It's a beautiful fall day today. So now I'm coming up to the United Church and I'm going to go in the front doors. They're just doing some cleanup in the yard today. So I'm inside now, and this is the area here where you enter into the main part of the church. And you'll see a plaque here on the wall that says it's donated from St. Charles and Snowflake United Church. As you walk into the church, it's a beautiful church with all the nice woodwork here. And you'll see the cross at the very end. So here's the cross, all lit. It's beautiful. They have a projector screen that they put down every Sunday so that people can read the words to the songs instead of they're trying to go paperless. It's really, really hard to see. I have some pictures, still pictures I took, but the plaques on the cross say in memory of Mr. and Mrs. somebody Fairburn, and then also in memory of Mr. and Mrs. Jack Taylor. Okay, and this is the area that we first come in as well. This is the communion table that came from Snowflake. The front there, it's hard to read because it's not in different colors as in remembrance of me. And as you go around, you can see the other side. And the plaque says, presented to the United Church by the CGIT group. And I can't remember what she just said, what that was. Canadian Girls in Training, something Girls in Training, not sure. Church Girls in Training? Anyway, so this is the communion table, and apparently they use it every Sunday. They bring it up to the front, in front of the other table to use for communion, so they use it every Sunday. And weirdly enough, just down the road, about 2 doors down from the United Church, is the bar where there's erotic bingo from Friday at 9 p.m.
Well, think about it. I want to know what erotic bingo is. I don't know.
I know. I didn't stop and ask.
Maybe it's something you do that gives you a reason to go to church on Sunday. I'm not sure. Well, and the video is so important, Karen, because pictures are wonderful. I love pictures too, don't get me wrong, but video just has a way of making you feel like you've been there. So I have a real appreciation for that. And I'm just going to read the inscriptions on the cross, and I'm hoping that somebody here can make sense of this. So the one at the top says, in memory of Mr. and Mrs. Elliot Fairburn from their family.
Right. Elliot Fairburn is the gentleman who married Grandma Fairburn after her husband, Jim MacArthur, was killed by falling out of an apple tree. And he married her and moved the family to Manitoba. And they lived in the house they first lived in the house where Ken and Letha were, and then they retired to the place where you would remember Hazel and Jack Taylor were.
Yeah. And he was Hazel's dad.
He was, yeah. He was known as Al Fairburn, even though his name was Elliot.
Huh. And so that was the fellow that Grandma Fairburn said, why, Al, I voted in favor of it. His real name was Elliot.
Right.
Couple that we knew as our Grandpa and Grandma Fairburn, as we never thought of them as being step grandpa, right, Bob?
Right. No,
we never thought of him that.
Never thought of him that way, no.
Yeah.
And Aunt Hazel was the only child that they had together.
Right.
Yeah. So why do you think the inscription was for them? Why was it in memory of Mr. and Mrs. Elliot Fairburn?
Well, the inscription was on which piece of furniture?
It was on the cross. It was the top one, the top inscription.
People often did that. Go ahead,
I think that was added later. I think it was probably, what other plaques are on there?
Okay, underneath that it says, in memory of our Uncle Jack Taylor. And then it says the McTaggart family, and underneath it says lighting. I don't know if that means they donated the lighting.
They may have donated something towards the lighting, I'm not sure.
And of course, we're related to all these people.
Right.
Yeah.
The Taylors, the McTaggart, Aunt Jessie McTaggart is Grandpa's sister.
Right.
Yeah. And then on the communion table, it says on the front, in remembrance of me. We have a picture in the slides that was taken by somebody of Joan Wheeler and Myrna Milger standing right in front of that table.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Rob sent me interesting pictures. He has a picture of, you know how the United Church they must have had plates made. I know several people have plates with the United Church on it.
Oh, yes, yes.
So Rob has one. I have a picture. You know what else Rob has? He has Grandpa's pen holder plaque, and it reads, 1935 to 1983, which is a span of 48 years, and it reads, presented to R.E. MacArthur by the Congregation of the Snowflake United Church for his faithful service as Secretary-Treasurer.
Right. He was the secretary for that many years.
Of the school, of the
Yeah.
pool board. He had
Oh.
3 boards that he was secretary treasurer of.
At one point, I remember him having to go to, at least 3 meetings a month because he was secretary treasurer of these different organizations.
Yeah, and in Grandma's diary, tons of entries. Elgin at a meeting, Elgin working on the church books. I pulled one here. Get this. This is on July 26th of 1970. Nice day after the rain and hail, 66 degrees at night. 3 windows broken in the church by hail. Went to church, then picked and froze a pail of beans. Hillmans came and we went for a drive across the valley. Tons of entries about the church. So,
right.
Yeah. And then I remember, of course, as I'm sure you do, is Christmas Eve. They had the wonderful Christmas Eve services there that were really elaborate and memorable. And that's what we did every Christmas Eve. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
I just wish I had a picture that showed when we were painting the outside of the church and we had 3 farmhand hay sweeps at the same time up on the side of the church as scaffolding. And you probably don't even know what a farmhand hay sweep is, but it was like a big front end loader that went much higher than a front end loader. And they had a great big hay basket on them, and we put planks across the teeth at the end, and people could stand on that while they were painting the church. And so you could just take it to the top, and then you'd lower it down, and they could paint the next level. One belonged to Finley's, one to Uncle Ken, and one to who was there? Bill Smith's. Yeah.
When you say this and you talk about all the things, and not just in this one, but other times that the community people did together, that wasn't just Snowflake that was like that. That's the way people were in those days. And
right.
People took ownership for that's. If you take ownership for something, you're more apt to support it and to think it's important in your life. And maybe that's the reason, life has changed, and we bemoan the fact that, there's not many people come to church, or not many people do this or do that. And it's just, unless you take ownership for something, it's
right.
But we take ownership for different things, I guess. That's the thing, And
I think it was more likely to happen where people were self-employed, such as in farming, or they had their own businesses.
Yes,
because they just were used to being managers, and they knew how to work together with other people.
I remember in the church growing up, there being, I don't know, kind of lots of fun on Sundays. You were there with some of your friends, and then you go to Sunday school in the basement, and then after a while, you teach Sunday school, and as you mentioned, Aunt Mary, going, singing in the choir once you reached a certain age. And I think it was Wednesday nights, I remember anyway, was choir practice, and might have been after public skating, or maybe it was right before public skating, just, things like that. It was interesting. I remember confirmation classes in the basement. I seem to remember even some kind of everybody came together to make something in the basement that was meant for raising money, for something. Right. So yeah. So anyway, lots of good memories, I think. And
choir practice was before skating, and I know because I was like, when is choir practice over? I want to go public skating.
Yeah, we didn't necessarily do everything willingly, but we did.
Yes, and of course during the cold part of the season, everything was done to save heat, so you'd do as many things in one evening as possible, so you didn't have to heat the church up every night.
Right.
There's a picture of us kids each holding a red Bible because we all won the attendance.
Yeah.
And I think it was a little bit embarrassing maybe for Mom and Dad, because each one of their kids won the attendance. And I was like, well, we could have friggin' skipped a week of church once in a while, wouldn't have killed us.
Yeah, sometimes it was almost embarrassing if you won the same prize for 3 years in a row
Oh,
for perfect attendance.
and you didn't miss church. Oh, and one thing I remember really vividly is Grandpa used to carry the collection plate, and I
Right.
remember his hand shaking because he had that Parkinson's or hand shaking. When
Oh,
he got
that's what I wanted to say. As a child, you came to church, the men took their hats off, their felt hats off, and hung them up on a hook. That was just every man had a suit and a hat. Like this is probably before your time, even maybe. And Uncle Vern was at the door giving out the bulletins. That was his
Right.
job. Nobody took it away on him. That was his job. And it was always the men that collected the offering. Yeah, your dad, our dad was one of them probably. Everett Smith might have been another one. I'm not sure.
Sometimes Ed Finley, but
Yes, there was another one, yeah. But it was never, like the women never did that. Women knew their place, of course. And then we kids weren't supposed to giggle. It was a pretty serious business when I was young. Church was pretty serious,
We're not to giggle. I got many a look. Mom could give you a look that would just kill you right on the spot because you were not supposed to giggle in church at all.
Yeah, me and Vicky had that look a few times too.
And Grandma had a church look. She had a very prim and proper church face. I remember that. She's pretty prim and proper anyways all the time, but yeah, she had her little church face.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then after church, when I was a kid, quite often we went to one of the grandparents after church.
Right.
Sometimes it was to Grandpa and Grandma Booker's, and sometimes it was to Hazel and Jack and Grandma Fairbairn's place. And there was always lunch afterwards, and so that was the best part of going to church.
Yes, yeah, and we tried to alternate this week one place, next week the other place.
And that is all in here. Sundays were a day of going to somebody's place for dinner or having them over. We visited there. Somebody called here. It's every Sunday in here. So.
And I don't know whether this is a place or not, but talking about going to Hazel and Jack's and Grandma Fairbairn's, just after Colleen and I were married, we just got back from our honeymoon about a week, and we had gone to church, and same thing was happening. We went there after church, and we just barely got in the door, and poor little old Grandma was sitting there on the chair over by the stove, and she looked up at me and she said, "Is she any good in bed?" And just imagine how you would feel when you're just newly married and some old lady asks you a question like that. I think there was some stumbling and stammering going on.
And that's when, this is where I think Mom would have hit you and said, well,
Well, that's it. You didn't know whether it was safer to be quiet or to try to answer.
Right.
Oh dear.
Right.
She was probably at the age where she didn't care.
She didn't care. No, she
really just
was
wanted
already.
to know.
She was probably 79 or so at the time. Yeah. Mind you, I'm older than that now myself, but I don't know whether I would say that or not.
You don't ask people that, do you, Dad?
I guess I'm less reserved than I used to be.
It is true that when you get to be a certain age, you do say things that you wouldn't have said in earlier days. It's fun to see people's faces a little bit sometimes, but they actually like it, I think. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to have this meeting, and Karen, I really, really appreciate your role in this and going around and getting all the video for us to see. That was just really, really valuable for you to get that for us. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And Aunt Mary and Dad, you always have interesting things to say, and I learn something every single time I talk to you guys.
I don't know how you guys have such good memories, honestly. How you remember stuff so
well. You know what? The thing is, with Bob and I, we throw one thing out and then the other person has something to add to it. And we're 5 years apart. So he does, and he lived there a lot longer than I did. So, and his interest in some of the stuff, how things were put together and everything is way different than mine. Guess that just went over my head. So I'm learning too, and I'm quite enjoying it. So thank you very much, Eleanor, for doing this. And you never know. Like now, some of these things, like I just get through sending out a short email to people and telling them that I was having a meeting with you tonight, and saying that, you know, if that it was going to be about our church and stuff, if they were interested to either get in touch with Bob or you, and maybe they might get to look at a YouTube or something of it.
Yeah, this is going to be a public video, not a private one, because I'm hoping that anybody who grew up in Snowflake or went to the United Church or grew up in a nearby town might be interested to see where all the parts, well, the major parts went, if they're interested, and all the other parts of this video that are going to be left as a surprise for even you to view. So I'll be interested to hear all of your feedback after it's live.
Okay.
So I could add in one thing here if you don't mind.
Yeah.
At the time of Grandpa's funeral and Grandma's, I guess, both, I was still involved in helping to look after the sound. And there was an overflow of people that had to be over in the rink because the church wasn't large enough.
Right.
And I ran wire over from the church to the rink and set up a sound system there so that they could hear the service.
Oh.
And that was after I had moved to Portage, at least when Mother's funeral was anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Dad's funeral was, of course, in stormy weather, and we didn't even we just the family drove to the funeral, to the cemetery, and then back to the rink. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just too much snow.
Right.
Yeah, there have been many a funeral there, a wedding, baptisms, communion, Christmas Eve services, recitals, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We're going to run out of time, guys. So
well,
nice.
God bless you. God bless you, one and all. Have a very Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you all, and Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it was great to see all of you. Everybody's just looking fantastic. Keep it up. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Oh, look, and I'm wearing my necklace, Eleanor.
Me too.
Necklace. There you go.
Snowflake. Every chance. Oh, the 3 snowflake.
Oh, Bob, where's yours?
I forgot to put mine on.
Oh, what happens when you get old? You know, you forget things.
Yeah, I have a question. Does your shirt say beautiful snowflake?
I'm wearing my original snowflake shirt.
That's awesome.
Fabulous.
And I have a snowflake necklace. You know, I got all kinds of snowflake gear. You know what I'm talking about. We're a breed all of our own.
We are. I have the snowflake necklace too.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if anybody noticed, but my email address is snowflake.smitty. I've had it for 20 years.
Practically everything is Snowflake 99. I think you know where the 99 comes from.
Wayne Gretzky, could it be?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. And I don't think this has ever been done before, to have so many Snowflakian girls on the same Zoom, however many years later.
Right?
So we're breaking records and everything. If we could go around and introduce ourselves, Denise, let's just start with you. Just say your name, your mate. We're all unmarrying ourselves and being a maiden name today, and then where you're joining us from.
Okay. Denise Booker. I have to say I really miss using my last name because it's much cooler than my married name. And I'm in Winnipeg.
And you're in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Awesome. Marla.
Yeah, I'm Marla Motherall. I also miss my last name. And I live in California.
I'm Julie Wheeler. Love that last name as well. And I am in Nova Scotia.
Leanne Smith. And I also miss my maiden name because my married name is Hoover, like the vacuum, and my husband's just over to the right. And I am here in Alberta.
My name is Sharon Gertzen, and I'm here in Manitoba. It's weird saying maiden name like that.
Right?
It is. And Vicky?
I'm Vicky Wren, and I'm in Manitoba. And I love my maiden name so much I hyphenated, so I frequently just use it because it's easier.
And I'm Eleanor MacArthur, and I'm in Alberta. And I never thought about whether I liked my maiden name better or not, but I always thought Eleanor MacArthur didn't really work out for me. So I'm now Ellie, and I have a married name for almost 29 years, so I guess I'm used to it. We're all gathered together today to talk about the Snowflake United Church. How much do you think about that?
A lot of memories.
Yeah. Great. So maybe we'll just go in the same order. Denise, can you name something that you remember about the Snowflake United Church?
There's so much I remember about the United Church. It was such a staple of the community. I remember the smell when you walk in. It was hard to describe, but it was almost like a warm wood smell, and it was just a comforting smell. And I remember the deep ditches out front when we were little, running in them up and down. I remember staring at the Jesus picture a lot on the side of the wall during the sermons.
On the left, yeah.
Yeah. And looking through the pamphlets while the sermon was going on, and pre-thumbing out the next hymn in the hymn book, waiting to go down to Sunday school. And honestly, my biggest memory of church is wanting to be an adult so badly so that I could have the grape juice and the bread.
That's awesome. That turned out to be kind of anticlimactic, didn't it?
It did, once I found out what it was and that you could just get it at the grocery store. But there was something about those little cups, and it was so like, why do you get that and I want it?
Well, it's funny you say that about the Jesus picture, because I was looking at these pictures that my dad emailed to me the other day, and it wasn't in the picture, but it was the front of the church. And I do remember always looking to the left, and then they had of course, the hymns were written, the numbers were written on that little, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not making that up, am I?
Yeah.
Okay. And I love the 3 chairs at the front. There was these, I don't know, something stately about the chairs. I always wanted to sit in one of them. I remember the choir would always sit on, when you walk in, on the left-hand side. Remember, we would always sit, the kids would sit over there. And for some reason, remember the red velvet curtain that was in front on some piping or something.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know why I remember that, but I remember that. And Sunday school, of course, going down, like, wasn't it a winding set of stairs to go down? It was kind of sketch. They were really steep steps to go down. And was there a real toilet down there, or was it like a hole in the ground? Kind of
The scary bathroom.
It was a toilet, but just real old.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
Kind of an old sketchy toilet. And where we'd go in, I can remember going into as soon as you get into the church, you go straight into the sort of the choir room, right? And it was separated with that panel of the wall would come up and down. I always thought that was interesting, like just a random thin wall.
I think they called that the annex.
The annex, yeah, okay. And I certainly, when you talk about one of your biggest memories, it's always the Christmas Eve service. It's true. Us singing the "Let there be peace on earth, and standing up in the back, and we get to sing with the senior choir. You know, we get to sing with the adults, and it was always this big thrill. And yeah, I just remember feeling so warm, and I don't think we knew how good we had it at the time. You know, I think it's something that's not happening for a lot of families now, but I won't go on and on about that. I feel really fortunate to have those warm community memories for sure. One more thing is the Wednesday night choir practice, and then we'd go skating. Remember, you'd have you'd be like, okay, are we done yet? Can we go skating yet? What
about that?
Oh, we have to sing it again. So you have to wait till you get to go skating, and
Public skating night.
Yeah.
Public skating night, Wednesday night.
What about you, Julie?
Just tonight, I thought about the skating thing too, Marla, how it was, you know, the senior choir would continue to practice. They would practice after us, I think. And then while they were practicing, we would go and do the skating, which was really cool. And I also agree that the night, you know, Christmas Eve's singing with the senior choir and just everybody being together, families being together was always just so special. And yeah, I remember actually, do you remember some of us played the children's hymn? Like they would ask us to learn a children's hymn and play it, those of us who took piano lessons. And I remember one time I was so petrified and I couldn't even get through the introduction. And Mr. Tyndale leaned over and said, "Do you have the right hymn, dear?" Finally, I got through it, you know, with Mom sitting, I'm here, right? And she's over there going, "You can do it, honey." Oh my goodness. It was, yeah. Never forget that one. But I remember your mom playing the piano, Marla, and then of course, Vicky, your mom leading us. And just, yeah, how wonderful that was week after week, come and be together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the little blue chairs downstairs. You know, and then we had the little blue chairs,
And the
that
blue
were down,
table.
the little blue tables, right? Yeah, until we kind of graduated to the older class with Elsie Brown in that other kind of room, you know. So, yeah. Oh, great memories.
Those are good ones. What you got, Leanne?
The Snowflake Homecoming Service, 1988.
Oh yeah.
Classic memory. It was wonderful.
The
And not
Anne
only
Marie
that,
song.
but the song Out on the Myra, that Cheryl Yake revised the words to be Out Here in Snowflake. And I still have that song and the words behind me in my piano bench. Definitely an outstanding memory. What else? So many. Confirmation. Going down, we all said it, teaching Sunday school, going down that basement. Marley, you made a comment, the bathroom was a little sketchy. And you know what? Not only did we went skating on Wednesdays, but I think some of us went skiing after church on Sundays. Just so many things. So many things. A lot of memories.
Sharon, what are you thinking?
Wow, I've been thinking about it lots the last few days, and it's like sometimes it's just you can't think of anything specific, but now listening to everybody, it's like, yeah, right. All that stuff is all memories for sure. Sunday school, Mr. Wheeler was our Sunday school teacher when we were in high school, I guess, and he was awesome. And the choir was, we always had so much fun with that, and singing was, I guess I remember more specifically Cheryl Yake leading us, and one memory I really have is for a Christmas Eve service. When I was smaller, I was sick and I had laryngitis, so I couldn't sing. So I was actually in the audience watching, and I really vividly remember that because I was so disappointed I couldn't be up there singing. So that's one I really remember. But yeah, and of course the stained glass window, that was a big thing. And yeah, just so many memories too. Yeah.
Don't you all wish that we just noticed stuff more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The church piece.
Yeah. you just have all these surroundings and you just get used to them and you don't really get to appreciate them. And those stained glass windows were beautiful. And I just would like to go on back and, I don't know, find a darn video, which we didn't have, of course.
Yeah.
What's on your mind, Vicki?
Oh, I had to jot a few things down because I thought, the call will come and I'll be like, oh, I had a lot of things I thought about, but now I don't remember them. So, I guess what I really remember is just how much it was just part of the fabric of our lives. I think particularly because it revolved so much around music. And I started singing in the junior choir when I was like, I think 6. It was sort of like the standard age when you were in grade 1 and you were starting to learn to read. So you became of age for the junior choir. And I remember my mom started singing in the senior choir right around the same time. And Joan Wheeler and Myrna Milger were my choir leaders at the time. And when they retired, my mom and Jean Mother all took over for several years. And I also remember very vividly how Wednesdays were public skating night, which was, kind of presented conflict of interest because, of course, just jumping out of our feet to try and get out of practice and run and take part in public skating. So I just remember that about winter time. We could not wait to get out of there. I also remember, Sunday school in the basement. And it's funny you say the little blue table and chairs, Julie, because I remember them yellow. And I don't remember, but they were child size, right? They were like these little mini chairs and tables. Like I remember that. But for some reason, I'm thinking yellow. I don't know why. And the same thing. It's funny how we all have like a little bit of the same kind of takes on those memories because for many of us who took confirmation and were confirmed into the membership of the United Church, that we can finally have communion. Yeah, and you found so coming of age, I'm so grown up, I'm so mature. Yeah, I remember all those kinds of things. And then just really the consistency of it and the pattern of it. Like every Sunday, Joan Wheeler walked in and up to the organ and started the music, and the processional started, and the senior choir came in. I can still hear the music that she played as the choir left, like the recessional. Like it's funny how that really just becomes ingrained in your memory and in your head. And then there was one other thing that sticks in my mind that I remember the Sunday morning that Alice Connor came in mid-service and tried to discreetly tell Richard Clausen that his car was on fire. And of course, which resulted in all the men leaving and running out. And everybody being completely distracted and not hearing hardly any of what was being said in the sermon. All we wanted to do was get out there and see what the heck was happening. That was funny. What a kerfluffle. Yeah, I
Did the service go on? Oh, sorry.
It did. All 10 left. They even came down out of the choir, so it was very serious because Landon and Bob Carther left the choir loft. So, and Mr. Tyndall, God bless his heart, kept continuing on with the service, but nobody was listening. Everybody was like looking around, what's going on. So, that was but really just, the people, but there wasn't a lot of, I don't want to call it turnover, but the people that were in the senior choir that you saw up there every day from the time you were little were the same people for the most part that you saw up there every Sunday towards the end, right? It was all those same people. And I thought that was kind of interesting and kind of neat. And just, it's funny that this is happening this week because I went to Myrna Milger's funeral on Thursday, and up in the choir, Wayne and Jean, Judy and Landon. I guess that's about it from Snowflake, but Landon sang a solo, and yeah, it was like, wow, I'm 54 years old and these people are still up in the choir. It was pretty neat.
Yeah.
Oh, those were lots of good ones, Vicky. No, I figured I'd go last and there'd be nothing left, of course, because everybody always she took mine. I just assumed that would happen. So I have a lot of same memories as you guys have. I would want to say that in a community, in a small town, church was a really big part of our lives. Like, we went to church pretty much every Sunday. I don't know if you guys know this, but I have all of my grandma's diaries. So all of her little diaries are a 5-year diary. They started in 1968 and they went right up until she took her last breath. And in every diary, it's just church, church, church. We cleaned the church. We had UCW. We did this. It was a humongous part of every, well, not every, but weddings, funerals, baptisms, confirmations, on and on. Like, it was just the center. But, in true style, I am going to be not as prim and proper as you guys, and I'm going to bring up some more naughty stuff. So I used to get a big old glare if I was ever giggling, right?
Oh, yeah.
Did you not get the look of death from up there at the choir loft? Because I did. It was from my mother, and I wish I never made eye contact because I was like, whoa, I better stop that. And I also remember in my teen years coming to church and being a little hungover. Don't pretend you weren't, because you was sitting right beside me. So I'm naming names. I'm going to tell you that Sharon and Marla and Leanne and I don't know for sure, but I'm going to blame a social in Darlingford because that's usually the culprit. And it was Sunday morning and it was communion, and we were all part of it going, no.
Noted.
Sharon, I don't remember you might have been the designated driver that time. I don't know if you remember, but I remember Marla and Leanne and I making trips to this unspeakable bathroom that we're talking about. And it was a long service too when they have communion.
That would be a long hour, wouldn't it?
I must have been the DD because I don't remember that.
Oh, I do. That was a rough morning. And
a convenient answer, Sharon. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That was also Homecoming, 1988.
Yeah, Homecoming was, definitely. We're all hung over that time. Oh, wow.
Well, nobody had to be a designated driver when you're on your own doorstep like that.
Yeah.
So I definitely remember that. You guys won't have done this, but I would have been out late playing for a dance the night before. So as would my sister Karen and my brother Rob and my dad. So we had very, very many late nights. Now, I would never be hungover from playing for a dance, but very late nights. And so that was up early for church, and that was also a rough one. So, those are some naughty things that I remember. So there. Now, we've all mentioned the Christmas Eve service. So does anybody else have anything they want to mention about what they remember specifically about that? Because that was elaborate. Like, that was a beautiful service. The song, everybody knows it. There was a lot of practices that we had to do to get ready in preparation for that big night. But is there anything else that comes to mind since it's this time of year?
Leanne?
I do. So yes, it was powerful. It was emotional. It was unbelievable. 2 other things come to my mind. The Tom and Jerry hour in Hannah, North Dakota beforehand. That some of us got to take part in. I think I got the opportunity maybe twice. That was it the entire time. But in addition to that song, I had the opportunity to sing a duet with my dear friend Marla many times.
Yeah.
And your mother played the piano.
I remember the one year they actually opened up those doors from the annex that you were talking about, and we all came in from there as something different. And I remember that I think that was the only time I ever saw those open, and I was like, wow, this must be a really special night for them to open up these.
I just remember that it went no matter how stormy or awful it was. Like, I remember one year, like, you know, we were only 5 miles from town, but we were storm stayed at Cheryl and Ken's afterwards because we couldn't get home. So it was just like, this is going to happen no matter how awful it is out. And just everybody home for Christmas, filling up a pew with your family. It was such a special night.
So, Julie, I have to tell you that there is one entry in my grandma's diary about how they did have to cancel the Christmas Eve service due to weather.
Oh, wow. Okay. So if it was bad enough.
Yeah. See, nothing gets past my grandma. It's all
No, that's all
good.
good.
Yeah.
I remember one year it was canceled, but because we always went to Mike and Cheryl Yake's afterwards too to have Christmas with them. And my dad was persistent, and we all 5 of us piled in the cab of the truck, and we still drove to Mike and Cheryl's to have Christmas. But the church service was canceled. So yeah.
Awesome.
And we'd often go to the Rins on our way back. Vicky, do you remember that?
Yes.
We'd end up, and I remember your dad saying to us, "Did you hear that, kids? I think those are the bells. You guys better get to bed. That's Santa. He's flying over." I could totally, and he played it so smooth, Bob.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I just have to tell you this because it's so funny. You guys know how, maybe you don't, because a lot of people are surprised by this, but people used to confuse my dad and Landon Booker, like people from Clearwater, Crystal City, because of the shape of the face, the style of the hair, they would maybe dress the same, whatever. And frequently, there's been a few times that people would have said to my dad, boy, they enjoyed his solo.
Oh, I did not know that.
Okay. So Landon sang at Myrna's funeral. Amazing. And sure enough, at the lunch, we were sitting there and a lady walked behind my dad and told him that she really enjoyed his solo. And I just about died. It was hilarious. So anyway.
Did he just take the credit?
No, he didn't. He said, I think you have the wrong person.
That's fantastic.
I never knew about that.
So funny. But anyway, where I was going with that was about the Christmas Eve service. Just that, like what you had mentioned, Eleanor, that there was so much preparation that went into it. It was a big deal. And Julie, like what you mentioned about people being home for Christmas, so it was special because it was a lot bigger because people brought their families that weren't normally there on Sundays and things like that. And it kind of wasn't Christmas without Landon's Oh Holy Night solo, and I dare say I think he could do a pretty fine job to this day because unbelievable. But it was the type of thing, like you say, when we did that final recessional, and you just felt so important because you're singing with the senior choir, and we all lined up at the back of the back pew. Just chills. It gave us like chills. It was really emotional and it was so moving. And it was. I don't think that there's a lot of families or kids these days that get to maybe experience that. So I think we were so lucky and so fortunate.
We were,
for sure.
We sure were.
Yep.
Did anybody else here besides me sing in both choirs?
I did.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah, definitely.
I think I did, didn't I?
I don't know, did we?
Well, I know that there was a point I felt like I outgrew the junior choir, and I didn't exactly volunteer to be part of the senior choir, but I think I sat on the bench maybe 2 weeks, and I can just hear my mother saying, "I'll fix her," and I got volunteered to be in the senior choir. So I know.
I just remember putting the gowns on because in the senior choir you got to wear the gowns, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I
that's
remember putting
nice.
those on.
The
What's that?
reason I'm asking is because everybody's like, oh, we got to sit with the senior choir. But then I was wondering, one day maybe we grew up and we're part of the senior choir. So I know I sang in both.
Yeah.
And I sang with your mom, Mrs. Wren, Vicky, because she and I sang alto. And then one time we had a alto solo, and she didn't come that Sunday. And I thought, oh, that's how much I rely on Mrs. Wren. That was a solo. That's scary.
I wonder, Denise, if we were maybe the last generation of the regular
Junior choir?
services. I wonder. I mean, 'cause I don't remember singing with I don't remember putting on the gown.
I don't remember putting on
I
the
know
gown
I
either, to be
didn't.
honest with you.
They were burgundy, I remember.
Yeah, no, you're right. It might have
Yeah.
been, the two of you might have been the last of the era.
Didn't they have cream ones after that?
Yeah, I was gonna say I remember wearing a cream one.
There's some cream.
That I
Yeah, cream colored ones.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
they
was
did
one of
get
those
new.
things
They
like the
got new
juice
ones
that I
later
looked
on.
forward to but never got to partake in.
Well, and I actually can't remember like if it was a weekly thing I sang at, or I know I sang at funerals with the choir, you know, in the adult choir for sure. But I think I had at least a year out with the higher ups. I can't believe, but for funerals for sure.
And then confirmation Sundays, they'd bring out those white gates. And
yes!
we had to sing, open the gates.
Open the gates to the
Yeah.
so wide or whatever. Oh,
I remember that.
Yeah.
Forgot that song entirely.
Yeah.
Open the gate.
Open for the juniors today.
Oh,
Open the beautiful gate.
Yeah.
There we go.
Wow. Good
Oh, that was
job.
awesome.
This is like a Swiffer duster on the old brain,
Right?
right?
Yeah.
So I picked can I read? I picked an excerpt of one of my grandma's entries. So it's December 24th of 1982. She always starts with the weather. Nice day, 5 degrees above zero at bedtime. Colleen set my hair in the AM, made cookies, went to Christmas Eve song service in the church. Good crowd, wonderful music.
There you go. And it was warm that year too. Then.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I don't think it always was that, but
No.
yeah, it was a whole thing, and it made an impression on all of us for sure.
Oh,
It was one of those things you just always thought was going to be there. So I remember when my parents were telling me, oh, they're tearing down the church. And it was kind of like, really? That's such a staple of the community. And
I did have an event that was the last in the church before it disappeared.
right.
1996? 5?
Yes, 97.
7.
I was
97.
there.
97.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it was torn down that next summer?
The church pews were sold, I think, to Wawanesa. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the
Wawanesa.
stained glass.
And the stained glass, yes, and the stained glass. But the church itself, like the building, the structure, I don't know whatever happened to it. But it was literally the week after because I had to ask permission to keep it going for a couple extra months.
Mm.
I found out that the Bibles ended up in an institutional facility in Manitoba. Mom and Dad told me that the Bibles went to a jail.
Oh,
Interesting. Okay.
kind of cool in a way.
I don't know about the hymnals. And they had just started that new hymnal then too,
Wow.
right?
Well, I have the feeling that this call is going to time out, which is too bad. But I just wanted to thank you all so much for participating in my little video project, which will be up and available to view soon. I have a few surprises. I've been really having a hard time keeping all this stuff to myself, so nobody knows about the Zoom call in my immediate family.
Wow.
So,
Well, Eleanor, thank you so much for doing all this.
Yes.
yeah, no problem. I had a little nightmare the other day that I got you all together and I forgot to hit record.
You did it. I saw the thing. It said record.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
I know.
okay.
I was like, as soon as I saw it recording, I thought, well, maybe that's a good dream to have. It keeps you on your toes, right?
That's right.
But
Nice.
you know, we have a lot in common, us girls, and I could never have everybody on this call. I mean, but we could probably talk for hours. But we all went to the United Church, and all of my mom's piano recitals were, well, I think the majority of them were held in the United Church, and we have tons and tons of pictures of. I think every year Dad would get out the camera. He was the driving force behind the pictures, and then we had boxes and boxes and boxes of slides. It took me 3 years to scan all of the slides out of those boxes. And now I get to use them in a project like this. So thank God that was done a long time ago, but I did not enjoy the process of that. I'm enjoying it now, but I did not enjoy the process of that. And my dad took a lot of pictures. So we get to reap the benefits of those now, but you guys were there for that. I mean, let's face it. Anyway, everybody joining in on this call was just like a community coming together. So thanks.
That's great.
It's awesome to see you all. Wow.
Yeah.
Merry
So good
Christmas.
to see you
Merry
all.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Everybody.
Prepare
He can turn the tides and calm the angry sea. He alone decides who writes a symphony. He lights every star that makes our darkness bright. He keeps watch all through each long and lonely night. He still finds the time to hear a child's first prayer, save her sinner call, and always find him there. Though it makes him sad to see the way we live, he'll always say, I forgive. He can touch a tree and turn the leaves to gold. He knows every lie that you and I have told. Though it makes him sad